They say you never truly know someone, not even the person you sleep next to every night. For the longest time, I believed my life was ordinary, in a good way. I had a steady job, a small but cozy home, a beautiful 5-year-old daughter who lit up every room she entered, and a wife I thought loved me with all her heart. Her name was Mai. We met in college, and from the moment I saw her smile, shy but warm, I was hooked. She was smart, gentle, the kind of woman who always thought of others before herself. I was never the most charming or wealthy guy, but she said she loved me for my honesty and how safe she felt with me. After we graduated, I landed a job as a technical supervisor at a construction company. Mai became a junior accountant at a small office nearby. We weren't rich, but we had enough, and we had each other. That was all that mattered, or so I thought. We got married when we were both 27. 5 years later, we had a daughter, Lily. She had Mai's eyes, big, bright, full of curiosity and my quiet nature. We'd spend weekends making pancakes, going to the park, watching cartoons. It felt like happiness. Real, simple happiness. I genuinely believed I was living the dream, until Tuan came back. Tuan was my best friend from college. He was loud, confident, always the life of the party. The kind of guy who could charm a room full of strangers without breaking a sweat. After graduation, he left to work in Japan under a labor contract, and we slowly lost touch over the years. Then, out of nowhere, he called me one afternoon. He said he had returned to the city to open a small mechanical workshop. I was thrilled. It felt like rediscovering a lost brother. Of course, I introduced him to my family. How could I not? I took him out to dinner with Mai and Lily. He brought gifts. He told jokes. He even helped Lily fix her tricycle, which made her giggle and call him Uncle Tuan by the end of the night. Mai laughed more that evening than I'd seen in months. I didn't think much of it at the time. In fact, I was happy. It felt good to have Tuan back. I trusted him like a brother. I trusted Mai like I trusted the sunrise. What could possibly go wrong? It started small, little things. Mai began visiting Tuan's workshop occasionally. She said he needed help organizing receipts and invoices since he was terrible with numbers, and she had accounting experience. I agreed. It made sense. It was just a friend helping a friend. Then it became more frequent. She would drop by 2-3 times a week. Sometimes she'd come home late. Traffic was crazy, she'd say. One evening I asked casually, "Did Tuan get the bookkeeping sorted?" She blinked, hesitated just a second too long, then replied, "Yeah, I think so." That pause. It lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. Still, I said nothing. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. I had no reason not to believe her. After all, she was my. Then there was the day she forgot to turn off her Bluetooth and her phone automatically connected to our living room speaker system. I was sitting on the couch playing with Lily when a notification popped up. "Tuan, I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room." My hands froze. My heartbeat slammed against my chest. I turned to look at Mai. She was in the kitchen humming softly, completely unaware. I didn't confront her. Not right then. Instead, I calmly turned off the Bluetooth, put my daughter to bed early, and sat in the dark alone, trying to breathe. Was Guy it real? Did I imagine it? Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't even my Mai. Denial is a powerful thing. The next morning, I watched her as she got ready for work. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, said, "Don't forget to pick up Lily later, okay?" I smiled back. Of course. And in that moment, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. All of it. The following week, I started watching closely. I wasn't invasive. I didn't go through her phone or follow her around, but I started taking mental notes. What time she left, what time she came home, what excuses she gave. When she wore makeup and when she didn't. When she locked her phone and when she didn't. I even pretended to forget something one evening, telling her I'd left a file in my car. I doubled back around the block, and from a distance, I saw her get into Tuan's car. She didn't mention that when she got home. They weren't doing anything illegal, not yet. But it was clear something was happening, something that had no place in a marriage, and yet I still couldn't bring myself to confront her. Maybe I was afraid of the answer, or maybe deep down I already knew. There was one moment I'll never forget. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Lily was napping and Mai was folding laundry in the living room. I walked in with 2 cups of coffee. She looked up and smiled, and I asked her as gently as I could, "Do you think we're happy?" She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "Just wondering, are you happy with me, with us?" She looked at me for a long second. Then she smiled that same soft smile and said, "Of course I am." And maybe that was the moment. I realized I'd lost her completely, because I'd never seen a more convincing lie than the one she told me right then. After that Sunday afternoon, when she looked me in the eye and said she was happy, I couldn't unsee the lie. It wasn't the words she used. It was the way her fingers trembled slightly as she folded Lily's little pink sweater. The way she didn't quite meet my eyes when she smiled. I had spent years learning her love language. I knew what she sounded like when she was in love, and I knew, without a doubt, that something was missing. And yet, she was still there every day, cooking, laughing, asking about my work, hugging our daughter, making jokes at the dinner table. It was almost worse than if she had walked out the door, because pretending? That takes skill, and she was doing it. Perfectly. That week I finally decided to cross a line I never thought I would. I went through her iPad. It was an old one, something we used mainly for Lily's cartoons and drawing apps. But it was synced with Mai's iCloud account. She never bothered turning off syncing, and that's where I found it. Not just a single message, but hundreds. Some were innocent enough. Work-related, updates about Tuan's workshop, receipts, orders. But others? Mai, you make me feel alive. In a way he never could. Tuan, he doesn't deserve you, he never did. Mai, I hate coming home sometimes. It feels fake. Tuan, then leave. Be with me. Each message was like a blade across my chest. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Not then. I sat there, numb in Lily's room, surrounded by stuffed animals and half-colored picture books. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, until the iPad slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the calculated betrayal that broke me. They weren't having a fling, they had a plan. That night Mai came into the bedroom after brushing her teeth. I was already in bed, pretending to scroll through my phone. She slid in next. To me, pulled the blanket up to her chin and said, "You're quiet tonight." I turned and looked at her. So beautiful, so familiar, and now, so foreign. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why, when, how. I wanted to tell her I knew everything, but I didn't. I simply smiled and said, "Just tired." She turned away and fell asleep within minutes. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing, wondering how many lies were buried in each exhale. That was when I knew what I had to do. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to expose her yet. What I wanted was clarity. I hired a private investigator, a quiet man in his 50s, professional, discreet. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and said, "You'll have what you need in a week." And he delivered. Photos, videos, date logs, Mai and Tuan, together. At a hotel on the east side of town, entering separately, leaving together, sometimes smiling, sometimes kissing. Once, holding hands like teenagers in love. The evidence was overwhelming. But it wasn't just the infidelity that hurt. It was the intimacy, the emotional connection, the way she looked at him like she used to look at me. I started documenting everything. I took screenshots of the iMessages, printed the photos from the investigator, created a folder, labeled everything. I wasn't sure what I would do with it yet. Part of me wanted to throw it all in her face and walk away. Another part, God help me, still hoped she'd come clean, still hoped she'd cry, apologize, say it was a mistake, but that day never came. She kept pretending, and so did I. Then came the moment that shattered me. It was late, almost midnight. I couldn't sleep. I went into the kitchen for water and saw her phone on the counter, unlocked. A message popped up. One, I wish we could just run away, you, me, and Lily. Soon, I just need a little more time. That was it. That was the moment my heart went silent, because they weren't just cheating. They were planning a life without me, and they were going to take my daughter too. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the glass so hard I thought it might shatter in my hand. Then slowly, I put it down, and I smiled, because finally I was no longer unsure. I wasn't afraid, I wasn't confused. Had a plan now. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I used to think silence was weakness, that a man who says nothing, who holds in his pain, who pretends nothing's wrong, is someone who's lost. But now I know the truth. Silence can be a weapon, and I was sharpening mine day by day. After reading that final message, soon, I just need a little more time. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, not in despair, but in clarity. They were planning a future together, a future where I didn't exist, a future where my daughter would be raised by a man I once called brother. That's when I knew. I wasn't going to lose everything. They were. From that day forward, I played a role. I became the perfect husband. I brought my coffee in the morning, asked her how work was, kissed her goodnight. I praised her cooking. I helped with the laundry. I even booked a weekend trip to the beach for the three of us. She was suspicious at first. Is everything okay? She asked one night while folding towels. I smiled. Why wouldn't it be? She stared at me for a moment, then smiled back. That's when I realized how easy it was to fool a liar. They think everyone's playing the same game. I kept gathering more evidence, but I no longer needed it. I had more than enough. Photos, messages, voice recordings. I had printed out their conversations. Dozens of pages. I even highlighted the lines where they talked about me, mocked me, doubted my intelligence. Tuan, he's clueless, isn't he? He has no idea. Poor thing still thinks I love him. Poor thing, the words echoed. In my head, like a taunt. And yet I smiled. Because every insult was another brick in the foundation of my escape. I visited a lawyer, a quiet, ruthless woman who specialized in divorce and custody battles. After reviewing my folder of evidence, she looked up and said, "You'll get full custody." "No doubt about it." "Good," I replied. "I just want my daughter, the rest I don't care." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't want to ruin them?" I paused. "No," I said. "They'll do that themselves." 1 week before I planned to file, I arranged something special. Lily's birthday was coming up, and we decided to host a small family gathering at our house. Nothing big, just close relatives, a few friends, cake, decorations, laughter. Mai spent the whole week planning. She baked, cleaned, decorated. She even bought a new dress. She was radiant that day. It made me sick. But I didn't let it show. Everyone arrived around 3 p.m. My parents. Her parents. A couple of neighbors. Lily wore a pink dress and a glittery crown. She was glowing. Tuan wasn't there. Of course not. That would have been too obvious. But Mai? She kept glancing at her phone the whole time, waiting for a message. Signal? I smiled to myself. She had no idea the show was about to begin. After cake and gifts, I stood in front of the living room, holding a glass of juice. "Everyone," I said, "thank you for coming. Before we wrap up, I just want to show a short video, something special I've prepared for Mai and Lily." Mai smiled, surprised. "Really?" I nodded. "Yeah, a small tribute." I plugged in a USB drive and turned on the TV. For a second, the screen was black, then the first image appeared. Mai and Tuan holding hands, entering a hotel together. Gasps echoed around the room. Mai stood frozen, mouth slightly open. Her mother clutched her chest. My father looked away. And I just stood there, calm, quiet. Then came the screenshots, messages, dates, the full affair laid out piece by piece like a crime scene presentation. Nobody spoke except Lily, who tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, why is Mommy on TV?" My heart cracked in half, but I bent down, kissed her forehead, and said, "Don't worry, sweetie, everything's going to be okay." When the video ended, I turned to Mai. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why?" I asked, my voice low. "Why did you lie to me every day?" She dropped to her knees. "I'm sorry," she choked. "I didn't mean to go this far." "Stop," I said, raising a hand. "Don't say another word." I turned to our families. "I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I will be seeking full custody of Lily, and I have. Every legal and moral reason to win," Mai gasped. You can't take her away from me." "I'm not," I said. "You did that yourself." The guests began to leave one by one. No one said much. No one looked her in the eye. Mai sat alone on the floor, trembling. And I walked away, holding my daughter in my arms. The next morning I filed for divorce. Just like my lawyer promised, it went smoothly. I got full custody. The judge didn't even blink after seeing the evidence. Mai didn't fight, she couldn't. Tuan? He disappeared. Left town. His workshop shut down within a month. Cowards never stay when the mask falls off. Now, months later, I live with Lily, in a small apartment. It's quiet, peaceful. Sometimes she asks about her mom. I tell her the truth, but gently. "She made some mistakes, sweetie, but she still loves you, always." Because no matter what happened, Mai is still Lily's mother. But as for me, I've learned something important. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's the calm before the storm. It's the power to destroy a lie with the truth, without ever raising your voice. They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal anything on its own. It only gives you space to choose how you heal, or how you let the pain fester and grow. For weeks after the divorce, I existed like a shadow of myself. I functioned. I cooked meals, dropped Lily off at school, paid bills. But I wasn't really living. It's strange how betrayal changes the way you see everything. A simple glance at the couch reminds you of the nights she pretended to love you. A photo on the wall turns into a reminder of the lies behind every smile. Even silence in the house feels heavier, louder. But the worst part wasn't the loneliness. It was the self-doubt. I kept wondering, how did I not see it sooner? Was I that blind, that naive, that easy to deceive? And the most painful question of all, was I not enough? That question haunted me. Every time I saw Lily sleeping peacefully, I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't found out. If I had just kept pretending like she did. If I had accepted the mask instead of tearing it off, would my daughter be living in a broken home held together by fake smiles? Or did I actually save her from something worse? About a month after the divorce, Mai reached out. She sent a long message, almost like a confession. She said she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that she thought she had fallen out of love but didn't know how to admit it, that being with Tuan made her feel alive again, but it wasn't real. She ended the message with, "I destroyed something beautiful, and I don't know how to fix it." I stared at that line for a long time. I thought I would feel vindicated, but all I felt was tired. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve closure. Later, I learned from mutual acquaintances that things hadn't worked out between her and Tuan. Apparently, he ghosted her weeks after the video, left her in the chaos he helped create. It almost felt poetic. She lost her husband, her daughter, and her lover, all in one blow, and I still had Lily. That was more than enough, but healing wasn't easy. Some nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m., my heart pounding, replaying old conversations, the laughter we shared, The plans we made, the promises whispered under blankets, and then the lies, the betrayal, the messages. Her voice calling another man babe. Those memories fought each other in my head like storms over calm seas. So I started writing, journaling, every night. Not to document her betrayal, but to remind myself that I survived it, that I didn't become bitter, that I didn't become someone I wouldn't recognize. I didn't scream, I didn't curse, I didn't lash out. I chose silence, strategy, and most importantly, dignity. One evening, Lily came home from school with a drawing. It was a picture of the two of us holding hands under a blue sky with a house and a dog next to us. "We don't have a dog, sweetie," I smiled. She giggled. "But we will one day, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, one day." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something different. Hope. Healing isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with dramatic revelations or perfect closure. Sometimes it looks like quietly making dinner for your child while music plays in the background. Sometimes it's taking long walks at sunset and realizing the silence no longer hurts. Sometimes it's smiling at yourself in the mirror, just a little, because you got through something most people wouldn't. A few months later, Mai requested to meet, just to talk. Part of me didn't want to. I didn't owe her anything. Not even a conversation. But I agreed, for closure if nothing else. We met at a small cafe on a Sunday afternoon. She looked thinner, more tired, like someone who'd aged a few years in a few months. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just said, "I ruined the only real thing in my life." And I replied, "No, you didn't ruin it. You left it. That was your choice. I just gave you what you wanted." She lowered her head. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I pity you. Because you thought love was something you could chase, outside of commitment. And now you know, it's not." We didn't say much after that, and when I left the cafe, I felt lighter. Not because she apologized, but because I didn't need it anymore. Lily still visits her on weekends. I don't stop. She's still her mother, but our daughter knows where home is. She knows who stayed, who protected her, who never lied. And that's enough for me. Sometimes people ask me if I'd ever fall in love again. I don't know. I'm not in a hurry to find out because I've learned that peace is more valuable than passion, and loyalty is more powerful than lust. I don't need grand gestures or butterflies. I need honesty, simplicity, quiet mornings filled with trust. If love ever finds me again, I'll be ready, but until then, I'm building something better, a life that no one can betray. I used to think that the most painful part of betrayal was the moment you found out. The shock, the heartbreak, the disbelief. But the truth is, the hardest part comes later, when the dust settles, when the house is quiet again, when you realize life goes on. But you're not the same person walking through it. Months passed after the divorce. The silence that once felt suffocating became something else, a companion. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel the morning light before the world got noisy again. I'd sit by the window with coffee in hand, watching the street come alive while Lily still slept peacefully in her room. That silence didn't hurt anymore. It healed. I took up cooking, not out of necessity, but as a kind of therapy. There was something strangely comforting about chopping vegetables, boiling pasta, trying new recipes. The kitchen became my space, where I didn't think about betrayal or the past, or what could have been. Just ingredients, heat, and a little patience. Lily began to join me too. We'd make pancakes on Sundays, laugh when the batter spilled, argue about how many chocolate chips were too many. Moments like that? They weren't loud, but they were powerful. They reminded me that life doesn't need to be perfect to be good. One afternoon, I took Lily to the park. She was climbing the jungle gym when another dad nearby struck up a conversation. He was divorced, too. Similar story. As we talked, he said something that stuck with me. "You know, it's funny. We think we're broken after something like that, but really, we're just peeled. All the noise, all the illusions. It gets stripped away. What's left is who you really are. And I realized he was right. I wasn't broken. I was bare. And from that place, I could finally start building something real. I started reading again. Something I hadn't done in years. Books about parenting, resilience, personal growth. One night, I stumbled across a line that nearly brought me to tears. Children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. I repeated that to myself like a mantra, because if there was one thing I could still be, no matter what I'd lost, it was a good father, and that was enough of a reason to keep moving forward every day. Mai still called sometimes, not to talk about us. That ship had long sailed. She'd ask about Lily, how she was doing in school, what she liked for breakfast these days. I answered politely, briefly. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't angry. I was simply done. She once asked if I'd ever forgive her. I said I already did, because forgiveness isn't about giving the other person peace. It's about giving yourself permission to stop carrying their mistakes. There was a moment, almost a year after everything, when Lily and I were driving home late at night. She had fallen asleep in the back seat, her little head leaning against the window. The radio was playing soft country music. The road was empty, and in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't sad anymore. Not even a little. I didn't miss her. Didn't miss us. What I missed was the idea of who I thought she was and that version. That fantasy, it never truly existed. What I had now, this quiet, honest life with my daughter, was more real than anything I had before. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't make dramatic declarations. I just lived, day by day, and slowly. People noticed. Friends reached out. Old co-workers invited me for drinks. Even my parents, who were quietly devastated by the divorce, began to see me smile again. They stopped looking at me with pity and started looking at me with pride. Then, one day it happened. I met someone, not the way you'd expect, not through a dating app or a setup. It was at a bookstore of all places. She was standing in the parenting section, laughing to herself as she flipped through a book called How Not to Raise a Serial Killer. We struck up a conversation. It turned into coffee, then dinner, then something more. But this time I didn't rush. I didn't dive in head first, desperate to fill a void. I took my time. She understood. She had her own scars too. And maybe that's why it worked, because we weren't trying to complete each other. We were just two whole people walking forward at the same pace. Lily liked her. That was important. One night, after the three of us had dinner together, Lily whispered to me, I like when she laughs. It makes the house feel warm. And I smiled, because that was all I needed to know. It's been 2 years now since everything fell apart, and somehow, it all led to this. A life I didn't plan, a love I didn't expect, and a peace I never thought I'd find again. Would I go back and change what happened? Honestly, no, because I learned something only heartbreak could teach. Sometimes the person who hurts you most doesn't destroy your life. They give you the chance to build the one you were meant for. So if you're listening to this story and you're where I was back then, betrayed, broken, alone, let me tell you this. You're not weak, you're not worthless, and you're definitely not done. What you're feeling now, it's the fire that forges something stronger. Let it burn, then rise. Healing doesn't always come with a final scene. There's no applause, no camera fade out, no perfect words. Sometimes healing just happens, quietly, slowly, in the background of your everyday life. It took me a long time to understand that closure doesn't always come from the person who broke you. Sometimes it comes from the person you become after they did. 1.5 years after the divorce, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop near the old neighborhood. It was the same cafe where I had met Mai that final time. But this time I wasn't there to dwell. I was meeting someone. Lily's school had invited parents for a casual event, music, snacks, games for the kids. One of the other parents, a woman named Emma, struck up a conversation with me about books. We kept talking after the event. She was kind, funny in a quiet way, a little shy, but honest. No filters, no games. Exactly what I needed. Dating again wasn't about filling a void. It was about rediscovering parts of myself I thought I'd lost, the parts that could still love, still trust, still laugh without fear. With Emma, I never had to wonder where I stood. There were no late-night secrets, no disappearing acts, no half-truths. And when I told her my story, everything, she didn't flinch. She just said, "I'm glad you didn't let it turn you bitter." That one sentence meant more than I could explain, because I didn't want to be a man who carried resentment like armor. I wanted to be a man who carried peace. Mai still sees Lily every other weekend. We've built a civil, if distant, co-parenting relationship. No arguments, no drama. Just the quiet exchange of hellos and goodbyes at the doorstep. She doesn't bring up the past anymore. Neither do I. We're not friends. We're not enemies. We're just two people who once shared a life, and now share the responsibility of loving. The same child, and that's enough. One evening, Lily asked me something unexpected. "Dad, will you ever marry again?" I smiled and said, "Maybe, but only if it feels right. For both of us." She nodded, then paused. "Would that mean I'd have a new mom?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "You'll always have your mom, but maybe one day you'll have someone else who loves you just as much." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "That sounds okay." And in that moment I realized how far we'd both come. She wasn't just healing, she was growing, and so was I. I won't pretend I'm the same person I was before everything fell apart. I'm not, and that's a good thing. Because the man I am now, he values peace over pride, loyalty over lust, presence over promises, and love, real love, over any fleeting thrill. So this is how the story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, not with some grand finale, but with a quiet morning, a full coffee cup, laughter in the kitchen, and a little girl's voice singing off-key to a cartoon in the background. This is closure, and it's more than enough.